create worlds in which some people keep gaining while at the other's expense. And the people in need are always having to ask for help. And no one loves to be in that position. And such people in those worlds are deemed as unable, they can't take care of themselves, this, that, and the other. When the reality is that the people who've been sort of the hogs, if you will, at the top of that power dynamic struggle situation, reality needs to be flipped. They need to be placed in a situation in which they desperately need help and have to ask for it, and no one will give it to them. That's about it. That's about it. That's about it. That is about it. So I was always independent. I was afraid really I don't want to ask people for help. I didn't know that people automatically were helped just by being present in households where like I thought you were just supposed to do for yourself. It's hard to explain. And should I have reached out to people for assistance, there would have been a huge backlash. In my case, there's a step family situation, and then it would be like, oh, no, you're not taking from my purse, So that wouldn't happen in a normal family. If your family was intact, your parents, if they're capable, would want to help you as much as possible. But when there are step family situations and they took your dad, who was basically the provider, which is very common from the 50s, 60s, and 70s for the male to be the primary provider, then, you rely on those people. So anyway, they're blockers okay. So anyway, sorry, I had to think for a second about someone who was passing and his minions following behind. We'll talk about how the radio brain works later and how bad that was. We got his name and number? Okay. So we are used to fathers being the providers. It was very typical for women to have, jobs, but they didn't pay as much. During my generation, usually the male figure was the provider. And if other people, like a step family, people who aren't even related but only by paper and law, come along and sort of live with your dad and hog him, then the natural born children like myself and say my sister miss out on daily expenses that would be paid for. My dad was very chivalrous, meaning he just kept doing for his second wife. It's like a slavery program for men. So in a way, he was a little too, but women think they win the prize when they can get a man to do everything for them. I never really knew how to do that. And I don't know that I would want that. I wouldn't want someone put in that position, you know what I mean? I want to wrap that man right around my finger and he's going to do everything for me. That's too queen princess for me. You know what I mean? Verizon around the corner. So I'm not sure how women feel good about themselves in that position, because they kind of turn their men into slaves. You know what I mean? And then I had a friend whose mom always said, oh, you have to train. During the 80s or early 90s, there was this whole meme about, and they didn't even use the word meme back then. But, sorry, they would say like, oh, you got to train your husband to do this, that, and the other. It was somewhat funny until it wasn't. At some point, it wasn't funny. At some point, it was like, God, they're really coming down hard for Mr. Dean. They're really coming down hard on him. I trained my husband this, I trained my husband that, I trained my husband. It's like, get a hold of yourself, woman, So in a weird way, I've often identified with men who were taken advantage of grossly by women who somehow felt empowered despite their looks or upbringing. I am amazed by this. I come from, like, women are insecure, they you know, are worried. I want to know how someone feels so quote unquote confident that they could boss their husbands around and get everything they ever wanted, and then some. And if anyone tries to come in to ask, like, by any chance, can you help me? Because I don't have enough money to pay for a computer, and you guys bought one for Kristen. No, you know, you're not taking from my purse. So anyway, you shouldn't have to fear asking your dad, unless there's some situation in your own family where no one has any money and you don't want to ask. But in my situation, I should have been able to safely ask and not feel worried about backlash or anything like that, or any comments from the peanut gallery. Which way are we going? So anyway, that's my little bit today. We had several videos here. One on Ice Plus Caffeine Blue Raspberry, and the heavy sticker on it, and how it played into a theme that went on for like 4 or 5 days of how to devastate women who aren't, you know, a size 0 and don't have enough money to be on every program you need to be on in order to achieve that. Thank you. We also talked about, aren't you happy, aren't you great, and does Disney cure depression? Not really, but it could help because there's so much planning involved. But if you don't have the money, it will just pile on depression, make you feel worse. But if you can do the planning and have something to look forward to, that could help. Or it could be a distraction if you take a friend who had a recent breakup or divorce and they're not thinking about that person who left for the whore of a secretary or whatever. That could be helpful. Then we have power dynamics, which I've been talking about for a while. It's a hot topic. And it's basically the idea of people who are conditioned and bred to believe that they control people around them, and they just come across as having heirs, and they're in your developments, and they just come across as if they are more in control and they know more. Flip that script. I can tell you right now, most of them aren't doing a YouTube channel. So if you feel like other people tried to control you or act as if you can afford a camera, pick one up and then just go with it and see how they start freaking out all over the place. You spent your whole life, most women like me spent many years like trying not to feel like a loser, and the other said people were always winning, quote unquote, if you were to see the world that way. You pick up a camera, start walking around, create a simple YouTube channel, they start having meltdowns, hyperventilating all over the place. Sharon, there's a guy with his head resting on Teddy. Otherwise, I would look in on Teddy, but there's a guy kind of slumped over. I almost showed him, but we'll keep moving along. The terrorist level today is at orange or red or greater, according to my readout of what's going on. So it's like you gotta hustle this way, you gotta hustle that way. So USPS, right, get some mail. So that's it. You know, you accomplish one thing as someone who's usually considered, you know, lower than the people who've always been in control in your family system. You accomplish one thing, and that